Good morning. This is Brett Walker from the Early Learning Division. Today is Monday, July 14th. Hope everybody is having a good summer so far. This brief webinar is for the early literacy grantees and for the purpose of sharing some updated information regarding the budget report template that I shared on our welcome webinar. We've had to make a few adjustments to it as a result of the fact that the grant funds come from 3 separate funding streams. And this question actually came up during that first webinar, and I answered it at the time in a way that I think was not a complete answer. So I wanted to get everybody some additional information and make sure that everybody has the tools that they need to be able to accurately and easily account for how grant funds are spent. So what I'm going to do right now is jump into first a letter that was sent out from Rhonda Nelson to each of the grantees, and if you did not receive one of these letters, please let me know. This letter explains the 3 different funding streams that the grant funds come from. So as you can see here, this is the letter that the South Central Early Learning Hub received in late May, and I'm going to use South Central as an example today. As I scroll down, you can see in this numbered list the 3 separate funding streams: family resources, support programs, and reading expansion that make up our early literacy grant. As you may recall, the reason that we rolled all 3 of these funding streams into one RFP was twofold. One was that at the time we were hearing from the field, particularly in smaller, more rural communities, that different organizations, early learning providers, schools and school districts in particular, were having a hard time keeping up with the sheer number of RFPs that were coming out of ODE's strategic investment package at the time. And each of these funding streams by itself would have been a relatively small RFP. And the second reason was, as we saw that there was a lot of overlap and connection between the 3 funding streams. So what we decided to do was combine them together to create the $1.8 million fund for this grant, and only send out one RFP to the field. You know, we knew at the time from the types of early literacy programs and strategies that we were looking at that there would be a lot of overlap and connection between and across these streams. So we're not, we're not super concerned about this. It's just really a matter of making sure that we're accounting for the funds in an accurate way. So as you can see here, in the Family Resources Fund stream, which accounts for approximately 13.9% of your grant funds, that stream is dedicated to distributing print resources, books, and web-based resources to families and caregivers through common touch points. Support programs, which accounts for approximately 41.7% of your grant funds, is really focused on building parent and provider capacity. And the third stream, Reading Expansion, accounts for 44.4% of your grant funds, and is focused on expanding the amount of time children and families spend reading, increasing adult support for reading, and improving the availability of books, curriculum, resources, and computers. So you can see that there is a lot of similarity across these funding streams, particularly between streams 1 and 3. So with that in mind, it's not necessary that you go to the length of having to detail each of your grant activities and say, this is a family resource activity, or this is a support program activity, or something along those lines. But what we do want to do is make sure that as you draw down funds from each of these 3 funding streams in EGIMS, that we have a mechanism for accounting for how those funds are then allocated towards your grant activities. So I'm going to take us now into the budget report template and let you know how we think that can happen. So this is based, again, we're looking at South Central's budget report template. And this is based on the same budget report template that I shared in the welcome webinar. So you'll see that there's a lot of similarities here. Again, what I've done is I have broken out the budget as you have built it in your grant application by line item. So we see salary, benefits, professional development, family engagement, materials, books, and web-based resources, evaluation services, travel, transportation, and admin. And for each of you, this first column, column A, will look like just like what you prepared in your budget as part of your application. Now in column B, what you'll see is in columns B and C, we've created a subtotal for each of these line items. So in C7 here, we see the subtotal for South Central's staff salary. In column B, what you see is each of those funding streams, and then in column C, what you see is how those funding streams are broken out to add up to each of these subtotals. So in this case, $7,637 for staff salary is broken down by the percentages here that you see for each of the streams in column B. So this is really, column C here is really just a reference. This is designed to give you an estimate of how much each one of your budget line items, how much comes from each of these three funding streams. So what we would like you to do, just as I had mentioned on the welcome webinar a couple weeks back, is that when you draw down funds from EGIMS, and you are required in EGIMS to draw them down by these three different funding streams, is to provide some type of accounting for them using this template as to how they're being allocated. So for example, let's say that at the end of this month, which is July, this grantee drew down $2,000 from for staff salary, $500 for benefits. Excuse me, 500, not 5,000. $500 for benefits, $3,000 for professional development, $5,000 for family engagement, $10,000 for books, resources, and materials, $0 for evaluation, $0 for travel and transport, and say $1,000 in admin, okay? So what you see here down at the very bottom is this last row is designed to provide the total drawdown based on each of the subtotal lines. Okay, so you have a total drawdown now of $21,500. If we scroll all the way over to the right, what we'll see in column S is that same figure, and what we see here in each of these subtotal lines is the total spend to date. So right now, that matches up with what we drew down in July because that's the only month that we've drawn down funds from. However, as we go throughout the year and continue to add to those subtotal lines, this figure will get larger, and this figure, the remaining balance, will obviously get smaller. So if we scroll back down here to the bottom, what we see is we've drawn down $21,500, and there is $78,000 in change left in the grant. So one of the things to keep in mind with the way that I've set this up is that as long as you are inputting figures onto the rows that are highlighted in yellow, the sheets are designed to do the calculations for you, at least in terms of the totals. What we need you to do is to then figure out how the funds are being distributed based on the three funding streams. So what that means is that of this $2,000, how much of it comes from, or how much of it gets charged to, however you want to think about it, the family resources line, the support programs line, and the reading expansion line. Now the easiest way to do this is to just simply take the percentage and multiply it by the subtotal. So for example, family resources at 13.9%, the easiest way to figure out how much to put on this line would be to do the total times 13.9%, and that's going to give you the number. Now, this number that I just put in, based on that calculation, 278, that doesn't autofill anywhere. So if you look here, that's not adding to our total down on the bottom for our monthly allocation or distribution. And if we scroll this way, it doesn't add up to anything either. The only thing that I have designed in here to autofill for you are the lines that are highlighted in yellow. So what that allows us to do is have some flexibility here. So again, let's just keep doing this based on the existing proportion of how the funds are meant to be distributed. So for support programs, that would be 2,000 times 41.7%. And then for reading expansion, it would be, 2,000 times 44.4%. And so these three figures here in rows 4, 5, and 6 will then add up, will give us a total of 2,000. So as long as you can look at those three funding streams and look at your grant activities and can reasonably make the case that the grant activities that you have planned for the funds that you are drawing down, the easiest way to do these subtotals is to just use the percentages that are already built in here in column B. Now, some of you have grant activities and strategies that may fit very neatly into one of these funding streams and not quite as neatly into some of the others. If you would like to work with Rhonda and I to set up your particular budget spreadsheet a little bit differently and with a little bit different percentages, we can do that. We have some flexibility across these funds to be able to do that. And what's really important to us is that we just get an accurate reflection of how funds are being spent as you're drawing them down, and which of these funding streams are supporting different expenditures. So this is really just an accounting exercise, and I realize that it may be a little bit confusing based on what I've laid out here. I'm more than happy to have a follow-up conversation with you individually, and I'm also happy to work with you to set up your individual spreadsheet so that it meets your needs and can be as easy as possible to fill out. And the reason that we have to do this is so that we can report back to the legislature when the time comes that grant funds were spent in the ways that the legislature initially directed us to spend them, and so that we can report back to the Early Learning Council and let them know how grant funds are being spent as well. So it's really this is really sort of an accountability exercise. But what Rhonda and I were thinking as we were discussing this was better to do this on the front end and have the information available for the policymakers that may ask for it, as opposed to having them ask for it and then us all having to go back together and sort of recreate an accounting process. So with that in mind, actually, before I wrap up, there's just one more thing that I want to show. So let's say we get to September. So again, as I shared in the welcome webinar, you see some of these months are highlighted in red. What I would like you to do is to use this spreadsheet as you draw down funds from EGIMS. So if you're drawing down funds in July, please go ahead and fill out the July column. If you don't draw down funds in August, don't fill anything out in August. The columns that are in red, those are the moments during the grant, the intervals at which I'm going to be going back and looking at these reports and making sure that we have some type of accounting from you, whether that's a quarterly reporting or a monthly reporting. It's totally up to you. But that what we have in these spreadsheets matches what we have in EGIMS, so that we are making sure that we're all keeping a running total of how we're using funds, basically. So just real quickly, let's say we look at September and say we need another 2,000 for salary, another $500 for benefits, another $1,000 for PD, another $1,000 for family engagement, and another $10,000 for bucks. Okay. So again, if we scroll down to the bottom here, we can see the total distribution, and then if we scroll across, what we'll see here is the total grant funds that have been drawn down to date and the total remaining balance, as well as the remaining balance by line item. And again, as you move forward, if we need to adjust these line items, that's totally possible and something that we can do pretty easily. The main thing again here is just making sure that we have an accounting of when funds are being drawn down, how they are being allocated, both in terms of the line items of your budget and across these 3 separate funding streams that make up the grants. And finally, and again, more than happy to have a follow-up conversation with you if some additional explanation would be helpful, and if we need to customize your particular spreadsheet in a way that's going to make more sense for your grant. So with that, I will go ahead and sign off. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time you've taken to listen to this, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. Thanks very much.